Subscribe to the channel. Do it now.
That's right. Subscribe to the channel. It's another edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. I'm Jeff Ketchum, joined today with Jason Sucamel and Anwar Richardson. No Alex Dunlap. Everybody keep him in your thoughts. Potentially going through some tough dog stuff today. We can all sympathize with that. Do us a solid as we talk Texas football today. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Get notifications. Do all of those things. This video brought to you by the guys over at DeadSoxy.com. Use your promo code Orangebloods. Get a 30% discount on everything they've got cooking. Bundles, single pairs, you name it. Go to DeadSoxy.com and get the hookup on the best socks that money can buy. We are huge fans of the product. We use the product. There's a lot about the product to speak on, but the bottom line is go get yours now at DeadSoxy.com. Fellas, we'll talk a lot of Texas football today. We'll go to Anwar first. He met with Steve Sarkisian today after today's practice, which only leaves a handful left before we get to the spring game. Anwar, we were chit-chatting about this a little bit before we came on. It sounds like if there is a big headline or a headline at all to come out of what was said after practice today, it's the continued ascension at the running back position of one Jaden Blue.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to ask Sark is, which one of those guys, kind of stood out on Saturday because, for him, one of the things he had said previously, last week, started to all run together, was that for him, for the evaluation process of the running backs, he said that the live scrimmages really mean a lot just because you would love to go live all the time, but he goes, that's not good for the long-term health of your team. But you need the live stuff with the running backs probably more than any other position groups. If ball security, seeing how they run between the tackles, like all those little things that you can't necessarily get out of drills. So just kind of wanted to double back on that one. And Jaden Blue ended up being the person that he said, ended up having a really good scrimmage. He said that, basically said, and he made plays, especially on the perimeter, described him as an explosive athlete. He also praised Savion Red catch. He said just from a position standpoint, he shows some physicality, but they kind of like what he was able to do in the scrimmage as well. I did mention C.J. Baxter, but he also he characterized it as a scrimmage that was good for C.J. Because he kind of struggled some. He said he got better as the scrimmage went along, but he started off with a little bit of a struggle in there. So he said this Friday, he said they have a scrimmage on Friday. He said that will be kind of a big step for him to show like, okay, now I'm comfortable. I know what I'm doing. And then he said out of that, you'll be able to see what he's capable of doing. So it looked like Jaden Blue ended up being the guy that got a lot of the attention. Savion, there, and then CJ with a little bit of a learning experience.
Jason, yesterday, Anwar and I did a position-by-position audit of the team. We get to the running back position. We all have questions about it on a concern scale of 1 to 10. Anwar was at an 8. And my thing about the running back position was that I just don't know what to think. I don't know what any of this means as by the time we get to September and the game starts. So I suppose the question I want to ask you is, what do you think it means that we're in early April and Jaden Blue is a guy that's being singled out? And kind of, I don't want to literally recap every word that Anwar just said, but I'm even more shoulder shrug-ish about the running back position at this point than I was yesterday when I was already a big shoulder shrug.
Yeah, I don't know. There's two ways to look at it, right? Is Jaden Blue playing that well or are other guys just not stepping up? But, remember, Jaden Blue sat out his senior year, of course. This is a guy that was, I think at one point, like top 50 in the country in the rankings or recruiting rankings, dropped like a stone whenever he sat out and had some stuff where just people calls him to kind of out of sight, out of mind. But I think he was a 10-6 something guy in the 100 meters. I mean, he's a really good athlete. And, Jonathan Brooks coming off the injury and the offseason surgery, he's being brought along slowly. I was kind of skimming Anwar's note, and I think if you're a Texas fan, you should feel good about Jaden Blue. And then I'm kind of with you, Catch. I know we talked about it on the board, or we had some banter on the board. Savion Red, dude, I keep hearing his name every week or every practice as we inquire. And I'm like, okay, how does he fit in, though? There's only so many carries to go around. But I thought it was interesting that Sark said he shows physicality that is really encouraging. I was told at Saturday's scrimmage, like Justice Finkley had a beat on him in the backfield, and Red just shrugged him off and made a nice run and had a couple other physical runs. So, he's not your typical receiver transforming into a running back. He's got some physical elements to his game. I think in Sark's philosophy, right, Catch, he would prefer to have one dominant runner. I mean, yeah, in a perfect world, you got a guy like Bijan and then a guy like Roschon who could be a starter as well. But I don't know that that's going to be the case this year. It's certainly not early on. But they're going to have a good offensive line in front of them. They've got a lot of talent that just needs somebody's going to have to kind of rise up. The cream's going to rise to the crop. I don't think my worry level is quite as high as Anwar's being an 8. I think they've got some talent there. We'll talk about C.J. Baxter, of course. I don't know. I almost find it more encouraging that Jaden Blue, this is a guy that some thought might leave after the bowl game. He might not even be in the program this spring. Now suddenly he's in a position where, I think you could make a case. He's the odds-on leader to be the starting back, maybe come August and September. So, I don't think my level of worry is that high. I think these guys will do just fine. I think they've got talent. They're just inexperienced. You may have some growing pains between the 3 or 4 young guys that they're going to trot out there, but there are a lot of, those guys are all talented backs that were highly coveted coming out of high school, and they were highly coveted for a reason.
Anwar, it's interesting. Sark, one of the things that we learn by, having a coach survive more than a couple of years is that you start to pick up on trends, what they do, how they act. On one hand, we know during the season, you can't put too much stock into the things that Sarkisian says to the media, because on one side of his mouth, he'll say that Jaden Blue's had an excellent set of workouts in December, and then on the other side of his mouth, he won't play him in the bowl game. So sometimes he just says things, and you have to remember that. We also know that Sarkisian is wary of guys leaving through the portal, and that one of the things that he will sometimes do is make sure that he talks to guys through the media as a means of saying, hey, we know at the quarterback position, he really wants to make sure that the appearance of Manning and Sarkisian Murphy are really close together, because he wants to make sure those. And we saw him do it with Casey Thompson and Hudson Card, and he's done it kind of every year at the quarterback position to say a certain thing in order to paint a picture of trying to keep guys around for the season. There is a part of me that's listening. We have sources that are telling us, hey, Jaden Blue's looked pretty good. He's doing good things amongst that running back position, but it's still hard for me to ignore what happened in the bowl game, and for me to ignore the fact that it would be just like Sarkisian to praise a guy publicly, and then in August, the things that he said in March and April just not matter at all.
Well, there's a couple of things to that, and it's a good segue into the other stuff that Sarkisian talked about as well. But to give you more credence to that, we heard Catch, what was it, earlier this year, how the goal was going to be for Malik Murphy to push Quinn Ewers for that number 1 spot. And now you just look at that and go, okay, you just exactly. Come on now. It doesn't even seem like, reasonable, feasible, no disrespect, but he had a setback, and it was still talking about, Malik could come back and push. You're like, can he? You hope so, but you kind of that reality creeped in. And someone asked him a question today, Catch, and it was one of these things that sometimes when the questions gets asked, you think to yourself that answer is not going to yield anything productive. And someone say, hey, you had some moving parts in December, and then basically wanted to know, like, hey, are you essentially having more fun now that your roster is settled. And I was like, oh, yeah, somebody's going to have more fun. It's not going to go that route. And then he really started talking about that. He goes, the reality is we're going to have some movement at the end of spring. He said he's watched the LSU women's basketball team win a championship the other night with 9 transfers. He's like, so he understands, like, this is what's going to happen. This is the world that they live in. He goes, I don't know what it looks like yet. He even says, I don't know if players have made decisions or not, but ultimately that's the time and that we're living in nowadays. And so he says you have to be realistic to the landscape of college football right now. And we've got another portal window that's about to open. And so he said, you try to have conversations with guys to know what's going on. And he goes, you don't want to be eventually depleted in one of your positions. But that is something that is not the first time he's mentioned having that concern about the portal that came up, again today for him. And so, yeah, I think there's some like, I want to keep certain guys here because I don't want to lose them to the portal. But I think he's also says he's understanding that at the end of the day, when spring is over, guys are just going to leave, he can't stop it, but he understands that it is going to happen. I think his worry is just, is it going to be guys at key positions that leave them within a little bit of a hole?
I want to ask you, so there's a question, and then I'm going to follow it up with me giving my opinion on the very thing I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
The question is, do you think there's a position in his mind that he's thinking of specifically when he says, not that he's worried, but that he just doesn't know what could happen when we get to the portal? Now, my opinion is I think Savion Red is one of these guys that he could be speaking to. Not that he's not legitimately having a good spring, but it's hard to know what Savion Red's real position is. He's in a log jam of running backs. I mean, there's no Keelan Robinson. There's no Jonathan Brooks this spring. We know that if he's still at the wide receiver position, that's suddenly a deep position that is harder to get on the field than it would have been a year ago. So I even told somebody yesterday, I'm not buying the Savion Red thing because I personally don't know his pathway towards a lot of playing time next year. Now, that's my opinion. Do you think there's a position or a group of players that he's even being more specific about than my theory?
It's a good question, Catch. There's probably several guys that you would probably have in there, right? I think Malik Murphy would be the obvious one that comes to mind as far as that's concerned. I think if you're concerned, if you're anything, they're so loaded in that DB room, Catch. I mean, they've got a lot of good guys in there, and how do you find the playing time for all of them that are really good? Because he was asked about the DBs, and I mean, he almost went down a roll call of names. I don't think there wasn't a guy that he probably didn't mention as far as the DBs were concerned. I'm sure there's a concern over that wide receiver room because you have a lot of guys who are going to, because you got the influx of the 2 young guys, the 2 young receivers, which means there's going to be some older players that don't get as much playing time. So I don't know. I can't really pinpoint that thing, but I would think some of the receivers would be coming to my mind, Catch, and maybe just preserving some of the good DBs because they got a lot of good ones. And you're going to have some good guys that maybe don't get the opportunity to play just because the cornerback room is so loaded.
Jason, I bring that question up because we're at a point in Sarkisian's term as head coach where he's kind of run out of Tom Herman fat on the roster. I mean, there are a couple of guys, but for the most part, we're at a point now where the overwhelming majority of the roster is older players with definite roles, and then you've got sophomores working your way back, redshirt freshmen, true freshmen. Those are Sark's guys that mostly haven't been around long enough for anybody to draw sweeping conclusions about them, right? It's not that guy's an obvious transfer candidate, maybe in 12 months, but like so many of these guys just haven't been around long enough. And I would assume to some degree, careful with that word, I suppose, that when he says, he's hopeful that guys don't leave, or that he realizes that anything could happen at certain positions. I do think he's talking about his guys really for the first time since he's been a head coach, that, the guys you would initially want to move out if you need numbers were Herman's guys. But now as we go into year 3 under Sarkisian, if guys are going to be leaving, a lot of them you would think would be his guys. And I'm guessing that's not what he wants.
Yeah, it would make sense if you're a player that was brought in under Tom Herman and you still haven't really cracked the 2 deep, or you're barely scratching and clawing for playing time. Maybe you want to try your hand somewhere else. I'm seeing some of the names in the chat, like Terrence Brooks. I don't see that happening.
Oh God, no. Oh God, no.
Andre Kojo, the guy's been on campus for two months, man.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I'm saying.
I do think, though, one that's been mentioned, and it's the first one that popped in my head, was when you mentioned the receivers catch, Casey Kane. He had a good bowl game. I was told he made a couple of really nice plays in their practice/scrimmage on Saturday. Yet, he's probably second at string for now. And then what happens when Isaiah Nair comes back? Then it's even more of a logjam there. And a guy like Casey could be thinking, man, I've actually produced when you give me a chance, and I've had a good spring. So and I hate to I haven't heard anything to indicate Casey Kane's thinking about leaving, to be clear, but he is a Tom Herman guy, Yursich guy more specifically. But I don't know. I kind of look at that roster, and sometimes those guys, it's just kind of common sense. If you've got a guy, Anwar mentioned Malik Murphy, if he doesn't win the backup spot, that just makes sense. Juan Davis at tight end, that was a Tom Herman guy, if he's buried on the depth chart and maybe one of these freshmen come in and is battling him for a spot or even moves in front of him, well, then that would make a lot of sense. So you'll see some movement, obviously, in the spring. Sark mentioned it. Sounds like today it's inevitable. It's the way of the world in college football today. I don't know that we're going to see any major surprises. Someone saying Terrence Brooks, yeah, that would be a major surprise. I don't see why Terrence Brooks would leave, and he's potentially in line to be a starter. But we'll see some transfers, some guys enter the transfer portal. I don't think it's going to be any major surprises that are going to send major shockwaves through the program when they happen.
Yeah, because for the most part, Catch, and Jason, I think you would agree to this. When you think about like the transfer portal and guys who have left, there haven't been a lot of guys that have left that you said to yourself, like, oh my God, how does the team recover because that guy went into the transfer portal, right?
I don't know if there's been any.
I was going to say, I can't think of a one, really, yeah.
No, so there is that, you want guys for the depth thing, and then certain guys that they fought obviously to keep over the past couple of years that will end up being impactful. Catch, you and I both know some of those names, but for the most part, when guys are going in the portal, first of all, some guys are going in the portal and have just gone into a wasteland, have just never gone anywhere else. And a lot of those guys that go in, you kind of shoulder shrug to yourself, and maybe maybe they end up at a Sam Houston State, and they do something good there. But for the most part, you just shoulder shrug and you let those guys go, because usually the guys who are playing, who have a home and have a spot, those are the guys that usually want to stay. The only other time, Catch, is when guys want to go in the portal to maybe get some more NIL money.
Someone said tight end Jared Wiley for TCU was good. He's okay, but I don't think. Hey, listen, Texas wasn't sweating the loss of Jared Wiley last year.
I don't think there's been anybody that they've sweated. I was going to ask if you guys could bring back anybody as we get towards the end of the spring, if there was a guy that you could bring back. I'm not so sure that my answer is not Andres Carrick, that, as a blocking tight end, he actually had there was an actual role for him on last year's team. It wasn't the role that he wanted. He wants to be a starting level offensive lineman, and maybe he has a chance to do that now in making his transfer. But there really haven't been there's been much more dead weight on the roster in previous years than I think there is now. It's a fairly lean roster with regards to guys that if you do if you go position by position and look at the roster, it's hard to come up with more than 5 fingers full of players that you think, oh yeah, no, if they need scholarship room, there's where they go get it. It gets tougher and tougher, I think, to make cuts now.
Someone mentioned Brew McCoy jokingly, but honestly, you could make a case he might have been the most productive guy that's true.
I mean, because it's not like you're losing Caleb Williams, right?
Yeah.
And you're judging yourself, holy crap, like Caleb Williams is gone. Nothing to that effect,
Well, even Mario Williams.
Yeah, even Mario. Yeah, absolutely. All of them, like those guys, to your point, but everybody else I can think of, I can't think of. Someone said Cam Rising. Maybe that's a good one.
So long ago. Was that during the transfer portal, or was that like right before the transfer? I mean, did he have to sit out
before the portal?
Yeah,
it was before the portal. We're talking 2018 when that happened.
Yeah. Nobody over the last 3 years.
He only played it. He was only in town for like a semester, and then both he and Casey Thompson immediately went into the portal, and they were able to keep Casey Thompson, and Rising was one that left. Jaquindon Jackson. I'm not saying they haven't lost guys, but those guys are kind of pre-portal era, if you will. Like those guys left. They weren't even on Sarkisian's watch. I'm mainly thinking of the guys in the last 2 or 3 off seasons, less prior to Sarkisian's arrival. Jaquindon Jackson might be the answer. I mean, if he were on campus right now and willing to make the positional moves that he did once he got to Utah, then you probably, because I think he would be the best running back on campus right now if he were playing running back at Texas. But even then, last year he's 3rd string. So
still think that dude could have been a great quarterback. He just went to a bad situation, man. He's just a baller all around, man. I'd take Jaquindon Jackson back and figure out where to
be an NFL running back.
Yeah.
I don't know that he was ever going to be an NFL quarterback.
No, man. I've seen he was kind of a running back in high school, but that dude's arm talent is incredible. He's just I just love everything about that guy's game, man.
We just picked the name of one of your old guys. You're going to stand on the table for him matter what.
Plus, he used to answer my phone call, and I was the only guy who answered.
That's the basis of every guy that Jason loves.
I did.
To who returns his phone call.
I say that being somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but no, I did. I loved that dude. I mean, go back when he was a recruit. I was like, man, don't sleep on this dude as a quarterback. I thought he was going to be really, really good. I think he went to bad situations where he just had really good competition in front of him.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, even in making a transfer to Utah,
yeah,
Cam Rising is still on the roster and blocking the pathway there.
Keontae Ingram, that's a good one from Ben G. Keontae Ingram.
Well,
but again, I don't. Did Texas miss Keontae Ingram though? I mean, not at all.
Exactly. I mean, Ingram is an NFL player right now, but had he stayed on campus, he was still going to be, 2nd string, 3rd string. I mean, Bijan was always going to be the starter. And then there's a question of would Roshan have leaped past Keontae Ingram? Very possibly, yes. I mean, again, Keontae's in the NFL. He actually had a really good year at USC when he was healthy. He had a hard time staying on the field. It kept him from probably being a 12 or 1,300 yard back that one season he was at USC. Onward, I want to switch to just talk about David Gbenda a little bit. His name comes up in Sarkisian's press availability earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like if there was a game today and the season started today, that David Gbenda would be a starting linebacker for this team. It's a little bit like the Savion Red / Jaden Blue conversation. I don't totally know what's what. Like, I believe he's playing better. I don't know what that means, though, considering a year ago he really had a hard time getting on the field at all. This isn't a guy that was playing very good and now has taken the Jalen Ford leap. This is a guy that wasn't playing much at all, and now because they have a wide open depth chart, is he playing because he's made legitimate progress? Is he a guy that Sarkisian is talking about? I mean, Gbenda has a season left, right? So if I need to look at the scholarship board, but he's later into his tenure at Texas. Mm-hmm. Would he be a guy that would look at things and go, if I'm not playing, I'm definitely out of here? Like, I haven't thought about him that way. He is a senior, so this is his last year. I'm just not quite sure what to make out of the conversation around Gbenda, both in the sense that he's making progress, which I can buy, but is it so much progress that if somebody was available in the portal, they wouldn't go get someone in the portal? Like, I'm caught between multiple thoughts and what it means that David Gbenda is possibly the best linebacker on the team right now, not named Jalen Ford.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the challenger part, Catch, because let's start backwards and work our way forward. You have Jalen Ford, and then there's like, who? And so, if David Gbenda, to a certain degree, isn't feeling the love, and he says, look, this is my last year, or second to last year, we got to look at the scholarship board to see where he's at. I know that COVID year plays a part. But if I got, some time, like I want to play. And so you want to make sure he's happy. Now, Sarkisian today mentions that, he's had a good spring, but he also said that it started in the winter. I'm looking at my laptop here. I got two of them up. For Gbenda, he said that in the winter conditioning, he said he was very intentional in his approach, not only from a physical standpoint, in the conditioning aspect, but also in digesting the scheme and in playing it in the way that they wanted him to play, and they liked the way that he showed up. And this is where you've said, the interesting part, which he said, like, he's playing good football for us, and he's the best version of David Gbenda that we've seen, to go along with Keaton Crawford, who then he starts bleeding into talking about Keaton Crawford. So that's the question of, well, what does the best version of David Gbenda mean? Like, what? That's what we don't know. What does that mean? There's the best version of me as a basketball player would never be able to defeat LeBron James or Michael Jordan or anybody in the NBA, right? But it would be the best version of me. But what does that mean? So that's what we don't know. Does the best version of him mean that he's a starter, that they feel like he's going to get the majority of the snaps, or does it mean he's doing really good this spring, and then we'll see what happens come fall? But for right now, if you're David Gbenda, you enjoy. Hell, no one's probably really mentioned your name since high school, so you enjoy the small victories, and you enjoy where you're at on the depth chart at this moment, and it's just about him keeping it at going forward.
What does it also maybe say about the guys behind him that aren't pushing him? And what does it say about Anwar? He's got 2 laptops.
He's not married. It's not like he needs to have burner phones. He's slipping out on the side. I mean, he's more than free to have 5 laptops if he wants them. I don't think he's got kids, so you always sometimes need to have a spare one when.
One's his incognito laptop. One's his regular laptop.
One has a subscription to some websites. The other, the kids can use. No, actually, to answer your question, Tom G works for a laptop company, and they get these laptops that they design, and then after they design them, they just discard them. So he's like, if you ever want one, like I can give you one. I was like, hell yeah, I want one. So I got one recently by him, but it's super powerful. I don't know exactly how to use it. So I'm kind of using my old one, and then he's going to walk me through how to use the new one. But the new one, which is what I'm doing this one on, is super. I just don't know how to get the fan to stop going. It just goes at all times. That's the really reason is I'm holding on to my other one as I use my new one as well.
Part of the commentary that Sarkisian offered up today had me thinking he's got portal on the brain. On one side, he's admitting we might lose some guys that we don't want to lose. And while I don't want that to happen, I'm not naive is essentially the message that Sarkisian portrayed today. But the other side of that is we've got our eye on the portal as well. And, we know it's coming. we're not blind to the fact that this is the new way of college athletics. He's not going to come out and tell us a single position that they have an interest in the portal, because it undermines the message he's trying to give about wanting to keep his roster as intact as possible. The moment you say, yeah, if a quality linebacker enters the portal, we can really be interested, because that's a message to the David Gbendas of the world that all of this is a house of cards. And the moment one guy comes in, that's potentially the card that knocks the house down. So it will be interesting to see how he's publicly managed his roster from a praising standpoint, from a painting the picture, Anwar, of who matters, why they matter, that they're needed, with also trying to maximize what's possible for your roster going into this season.
So one of the things that Sarkisian was asked today, this is actually ends up being a good bleeding into everything you're asking, and something that Sarkisian touched on today, because he was asked a little bit about, like, the depth chart, and is that something you want to have determined essentially by the end of spring, or is that something that you want to go into have in the fall camp? And he said he will meet, they'll meet with every player at the end of the spring and tell them where they're at. And he said, look, if you're playing next Saturday, this is where you would be on the depth chart. And he's like, doesn't mean that's the end all be all, but this is where this is the kind of work that you need to put in. So he'll have these conversations. And then, for some catch, I think it will be the kind of nudging of like, hey, you know what? This is where you're at. If we had a game next week, you wouldn't play. If you had a night game next week, you wouldn't travel at all. And, look, this is where you have the conversations of guys. I'd say you might want to consider going somewhere else. It would be beneficial to you. And by the way, we can help you land somewhere. Like there are FBS schools that you can land in, and we can help you get there, because you're probably never going to play here again. Those conversations come in the spring. It's kind of the reality and some of the business of what college football is. But that came up again today. Again, that wasn't unsolicited. That was someone that kind of brought it up to him. But that also bleeds into the transfer portal, because I think the point that you made is correct, which was a good one. In order to get one guy in the portal, Texas needs to lose, what did you say, 3 or 4? What's that number?
They're at 88 without the rest of the freshmen showing up. So there will be some attrition just to get the roster to 85. But if they wanted to take one more, they would need 4 to go. 2 would be, they need 5 to go. They'll probably hit those numbers with ease, but it hadn't happened yet. It's part of, I think, the cleanup process from a roster maintenance standpoint that has to occur. And Anwar and Jason, I'll throw this to you too, like just as part of the conversation. Some of these are guys that there are some guys that if you look at the roster, there's a handful of guys that you'd go, he's not even on the second string offense at this point. Like maybe he's a candidate, but I can remember reaching out to people connected to those players. Either they reached out to me or vice versa back in December and January. And the message I was getting from some people was, yeah, he likes it. He likes it here.
Mm-hmm.
He likes it here. He doesn't want to leave.
Especially if you're an offensive lineman, you get that pancake factory.
Oh, yeah. If I'm an old lineman, I ain't leaving. Sark can be like, you're never playing. I'm like, is the check clearing in August?
Yeah,
I hate to call the guy out, but like Max Merrill is a third-year player who isn't on the 2 deep at this point. And he gets that pancake factory money. And there's no guarantee that if he enters the portal, there's any place that's both scholastically and athletically on the level of Texas. He just may not want to go. And, if you're Sark, you have to be – there's a fine line between pushing a guy towards the portal a little bit and flat out trapdooring a guy. And you don't want to get the rep that players and their high school coaches can't trust you with their kids, that the message almost has to be, even if they're not playing, we're going to love on them and they're going to have a home. And that's why you come here. But it is a different era. And it's not as simple as if you come here, you can just be here for 4 or 5 seasons. So it will be interesting to see how this thing is maintenance after spring concludes, because there will be some guys that probably get nudges. But I also think there are guys who've been nudged before and don't want to be nudged. They're cool. Give me my 50 grand.
Mhm.
And I'll be a good soldier for you, even if I'm not on the 2 deep.
Hey, someone said in the chat they can pull a scholarship. That would be almost not committing coaching suicide. It's not, but I mean, you just don't do that. You don't pull a guy's scholarship, but like that. But Max Merrill catch, looking at the scholarship board, he's a sophomore. He's got 3 more years in this program if he wants. That's $150K if he never plays a down. It's pretty easy. Like you said a little bit ago, you said, hey, Sark's not going to come out and say, hey, if a linebacker's there, we're going to take him. But it's pretty easy to say, okay, they'd take a linebacker, they'd take a D tackle, they'd take an edge always. Maybe a tight end, not necessarily for this year, but it was a guy that could take that transition after Jatavion. But that's about the only positions I think they would take transfers. On the flip side of that, it's pretty easy to look at it and say where some of these departures might come from. I don't want to name names and speculate, but I mean, wide receivers, pretty obvious.
Any player that's not on the 2 deep,
tight end,
I think is a question.
There's a couple guys in the secondary, a few guys actually in the secondary. It would make a lot of sense if they wanted to, go test the water somewhere else. It's pretty easy to see where some of these guys going out are going to come from, and potentially guys coming in, what positions they would come from.
Anwar, you know what we're not hearing that we were hearing a year ago?
What's that?
NIL isn't working against Texas in its own roster maintenance. A year ago, they were bringing in transfers, and those dudes were getting rewarded with NIL dollars to such an extent that a guy like Jahdae Barron was like, maybe I need to test the waters to see what I can get, because I want to get some of that. I want to get some of that, Isaiah Nayor NIL money that hadn't exactly come my way. It's kind of quieted down on that front, almost as if, and I think it has, the NIL guys across the country have somewhat tightened the reins on. It's not total wild, wild west stuff the way that it was maybe 12 months ago. Still, there is also that component. We've seen guys either test the waters or almost test the waters. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible to think that Texas could have a player or two do the exact same thing. It's part of the process now. And it's hard not to watch what happened in college basketball with UConn, San Diego State, Texas. Some sports are LSU and women's basketball are much more portal dominated than football has been. But, I think there will be some guys across the country that are surprises in the portal. It was this time last year, wasn't it, that Jordan Addison entered the portal? And I don't know that anybody
said it like,
what's that?
I said, I've always said, if you're Kelvin Banks, why wouldn't you put your name in the portal, honestly? And
just to see.
I mean, seriously, someone, who knows, man, Georgia or Alabama or someone may be like, all right, dude, we'll give you whatever, $500,000 or something. I mean,
more than that.
Maybe, Anwar, maybe more than you might be right. But I mean, I hate to even put that out there. I hope Kelvin doesn't hear it because Texas fans will hate me. But I mean, why wouldn't he, right? I mean, what's you have to lose?
Well, and that's what we wait to see, if something, not specifically with Texas,
right,
just around the country.
I'm talking about just in general, exactly.
Yeah. Are there some surprise heavy hitter inclusions? And if you're Texas, you have to at least throw your hat in the ring, because you're about improving, the talent on your roster. And if that's the way to do it, you've got to at least try. But some of that stuff Texas won't be privy to until it happens.
So it's a lot of chasing away. Sorry.
Yeah. But the thing is, still, Catch, this is the cautionary tale with it, is that, there is some success, but the risk associated with that is, there were some guys who spent some NIL money that wasted money last year. Jordan Addison, because of the injuries, ends up being a total waste of money for those who cut the check for him. Ajay Hall, at Texas, that ends up being a waste of money when it's all said and done. Jaleel Billingsley, ends up being a waste of money when it was all said and done. Isaiah Nayer, not anything to discredit him because the injury happened. He didn't have any control over that thing. We still believe in his talent. But at the end of the day, that's ended up being a waste of money. You know what I'm saying? So there is that, okay, go in there in the portal. But if you have to spend a certain amount of money or spending the kind of money, if you're Texas, especially you're Texas, the guys, the heavy hitters that cut the check, a lot of those guys didn't have a lot to show for it when it was all said and done for guys that they got out of the portal. There hasn't really been a real portal game changer when you think about it, Catch, that it's come here to Texas. Everyone, especially in Sarkisian's era, whether
Quinn would be the one, but yeah.
Who would be?
Quinn, potentially.
Well,
Quinn
and Ryan Watts this season as well.
Quinn, Ryan, in a certain degree, Keelan Robinson. And then if we go to the other guys, it's just kind of been like, okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens with a catalog.
Well, wasn't even an Ovi Ogofu. Ultimately, we didn't think he's a great player. He didn't play well enough that he even is going pro this season. But he played like 700 snaps last year. He was the no doubt about it starter. They've done better through the portal than I think we're giving them credit for. But we haven't seen the big guy yet. We haven't seen the guy who's turned into an NFL draft pick yet. So I'm somewhere stuck between two places on where I totally feel what you're saying, and you make a really good point. But the cavalry may be coming in this next year with Ewers, Watts, A.D. Mitchell. Boy, it'll be a massive disappointment if A.D. Mitchell isn't that kind of player for Texas. He certainly was brought over to build off of what he's done at Georgia. The Georgia people thought he would have been their number one receiver this year, which means presumably if he stays healthy, he's a guy catching 50, 60, 70 passes. So if he's at the end of this year, if he's like 35 catches for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns, that did not work out. And that's pretty productive stuff, but they're aiming for more than that. Isaiah Nayor could have been that a year ago. There have been some extenuating circumstances on a few of these guys.
Yeah, but that's just like I say, that's the cautionary tale, I think. And I think the Sarkisian has been very, consistent on saying we'll kick the tires, we'll check into guys, but you just don't, you don't know. You just don't know how those guys are going to shake out, how to, there's the locker room chemistry thing. Like, how does that all work? It was interesting. I was watching Lincoln Riley Catch being interviewed. He was on Cowherd, I think it was yesterday. He was talking about the transfer portal, and Jason, I think, would appreciate this because he's kind of more of a high school guy. He goes, with the high school guys, you've recruited them for a few years. So you get to know the family, you get to know the coaches, you get to know the kid gets to come on your campus a bunch of times. And you have a good understanding of who the kid is. You go, the transfer portal guy comes in and you only have a matter of hours, maybe a couple of days. And it goes, you don't get a chance to do all your due diligence like a high school kid that you've recruited for a few years. And it goes, so that's what makes the portal difficult is you got a guy who's out here, but you don't have a lot of time to react, and you don't have a lot of time to really gather all your knowledge about a kid.
Yeah, he took a whole roster full of transfer guys last year, and
his guys.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right.
Our guy Barry asks in the chat, "What do you think makes a kid like A.D. Mitchell enter the portal other than NIL? What's the logic?" Barry, every kid's is a snowflake. Everybody's got a little bit of a different situation. They're from a different place. A.D. Mitchell, in a perfect world, wanted to get closer to home. He's got some family stuff that being closer to Texas enabled him to, that helped in his pursuit. It's one of the reasons why that was such a slam dunk, is that Texas had a need for a player at his position, but he was also looking to get back to the state of Texas. And, where Texas has had some success in the portal, Jason, a guy like Calvin Anderson, Texas does best.
Again, those were grad transfers. He wasn't
but it was still a guy who's from Austin or from the state of Texas that moving back gets them closer to their family. Barry, that'd be I think the profile that Texas will do best with moving forward are guys who are from the Lone Star State, who went out of state, and then coming back allows them to kill a couple of birds with a single stone. It's NIL. It's closer to the family. Those are things that typically impact guys. Playing time, let's not be naive, though. Playing time is a big part if it's a guy who's got any kind of rep at all. It's a guy who wants to find a better playing time situation than where he previously was. And Texas will find less and less room for those types of players as Sarkisian continues to build the roster. The hope would be by this time next year, you don't have gaping holes at certain positions where, you're portal shopping, hoping to make that immediate improvement. It's really hard to do in a lot of cases. Jason brought up the tight end position. They've got Jatavion Sanders. There's really not even the freshman, right? I mean, I'm not looking at Shannon or Will Randall as guys that are going to be impact tight end players, but those guys don't grow on trees. It's not like even in the portal, you're going to find, the best portal tight end I can think of in the last few years has been Eric Gilbert, the kid that was at LSU, and then it was Georgia, and it's kind of had a hard time even staying eligible, and it just hasn't completely happened for him yet. So I don't know. Again, every situation is a little bit unique. They're never 100% the same. All right, last question, guys, and then we'll go into portal shots for audience out there. It's a yes or no question, then follow it up with whatever context you want to. Jason, do you think Texas goes out and grabs at least one more player in the portal this offseason?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it'll be more than one probably. I still think they have needs on defense. I think they'll get at least one on defense, maybe a couple from that front seven, if you will, on defense. I mean, but they've done that before with the Ray Thorntons and the Ovi. Ovi filled a role, I know it, but I think maybe they'll be a bit more selective. But yes, I do think they'll get at least one more guy on defense from the portal.
Anwar, what do you think?
Yeah, I would totally, agree. It seems like Sarkisian loves receivers, so that would be the craziest thing for him to actually pick up. Be the thing I would say to myself that would make no sense at all.
Well, we know they're looking at the USC transfer.
I mean,
a smidge.
He loves receivers. Like we used to joke about Tom loving receivers and not having a shortage of them. But I do agree with Jason though. You can definitely get some help, on a defensive thing if there are ways. If there's an upgrade at the linebacker position available, or at least somebody that they can throw in the key role while they wait for some of the younger guys to develop, maybe just a 1 yearish kind of guy, something to that effect would make probably a lot of sense. Edge guys are going to be a little bit more difficult to find, especially if someone's probably going to be impactful. But it'd be interesting too, Catch. I'd be interested to see if there's a breakdown of December portal transfers versus like April, like are the April guys people are they impact guys, or are they just guys who just don't have a shot to play? It'd be interesting to see how what that breakdown looked like. But I definitely would see probably at least one more.
I think my answer is yes, and I think they're one guy at the receiver position away, like say Jaden Alexis, hypothetically. He's from the state of Florida. I think from a profile standpoint, he's not really on the too deep. If any receiver at all decided to leave, Texas goes in on paper into the season with single-digit wide receivers, which is kind of bonkers when you consider that when Sarkisian got here, there were like 15, 16 receivers on the roster. They're officially at 10 right now, And that's counting Brennan Thompson. That's counting Ryan Niblett, who hasn't showed up yet. So should one guy, for any reason, that includes Isaiah Nayor, who hasn't been healthy, if for any reason they were to lose a player or two there, they're absolutely in single digits. And they probably optimally would like to have about 12. I don't think they want to get up to 14, 15 like they once were, but they don't want to be in single digits either. So even though we think they're fine at the top of the wide receiver depth chart, they would have absolutely been interested in Berrien Brown out of Kentucky had he gone into the portal, and that didn't happen. I think you hit on something, Anwar, whether you're just trying to be funny or not. We're all looking at linebacker and edge, but it wouldn't shock me if they took two guys. I would almost bet money that one of those guys is a receiver. And there's more of a need there than I think most fans realize, because I think you start counting the guys that you think are going to play this season and you think you're A-okay at that position. But numbers-wise, they're already a little light. And if anybody just leaves, then they're even more light from a numbers standpoint. So I think you hit on something there. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up and go into parting shots. I've got mine ready to go.
I got mine.
Jay, Anwar, I'll let you go first.
You know what? So here's mine, Catch, and you may appreciate this because you and I enjoy people who have a little bit of bravado, but not going into the topic of the day. Rodney Terry did that interview that he did in Houston at the Final Four, where Rodney Terry finally put his things on the table because he was asked about the roster, and finally Rodney Terry came out and said, you know what? Hey, Chris didn't put together this roster by himself. He goes, I ain't wanting to pat myself on the back, but I recruited 3 starters on this roster. He's like, don't get it twisted. It was a team effort. I was like, oh, snap, Rodney Terry. Go ahead and talk your shit right there. I was impressed. I'm like, you go ahead. No more of this. I've got to tap dance. Rodney Terry's like, I got my contract. I don't have to, tap dance anymore. I did this damn thing as well. Yeah, Chris Beard, I'm tired of you guys always giving that guy all the credit. I had something to do with this as well. And so I said, props to you, Rodney Terry, for just putting on the table and say, you know what, enough is enough. You guys ain't going to pat me on the back. I'll pat myself on the back and give me some damn respect. Rodney Terry got my respect.
You know what I thought?
Got to back it up now.
I wonder if moving forward now it's since he put it on the table with every kid that they land, is it within reason to ask whether or not Rodney Terry got that guy, or if there was an assistant coach on the Texas roster that deserves more? Because no assistant coach in the country really gets credit for team building. The head coach gets credit for that. Rodney Terry was saying, I deserve some credit. I wonder, as they go into the portal and they're looking for guys this year, if we get into the season, are we allowed to ask as a media group, does any of your assistant coaches deserve more shine than they're currently getting? Wondering.
It's it is a question. I get why he finally pushed back, because you got to think, for Rodney, from the moment that he's basically taken over, all he's heard is that it's Chris Beard.
But every program in the country is set up that way. There's a head coach that gets credit for building.
Yeah, but not every program has an interim coach for 4 months where he's got to.
But Danny Hurley built the UConn team. But I guarantee you there are coaches who are responsible specifically for the lion's share of the work in bringing in some of those players. And those assistant coaches never get their run, really. So I don't know. I didn't know that it needed to be said, even if I know why he said it.
I'm kind of listen, man, it's one thing to hear that once or twice. He's been listening to it for 4 months straight, nonstop, man. So, whatever, man. I don't fault him one bit.
It made me think there's no reason for us not to hold his feet to the fire in year
What was I
one.
saying? He's got to back it up
was.
now.
Well, he's got to back it up. But you know what? If he wanted a George Jefferson moment, he was definitely entitled to have his George Jefferson
He's definitely
moment.
not afraid to back it up, which is impossible not to like. That's what you want out of your coach, is a guy who will let them hang a little bit. But
there's a super chat. Blake, if you can put that up, I'll touch on that, and then I'll do my parting shot and catch. I'll let you wrap us up. Super chat. Sark deserves more credit than Tashard Choice for Baxter, CJ Baxter. No, absolutely not. I'm not saying Sark didn't deserve some credit, and he's always involved, especially on offensive guys and skill position guys. I mean, Sark's a very active recruiter in terms of head coaches, even on the defensive side of the ball. But no, man, Tashard Choice did a phenomenal job with Cedric Baxter, and that's the biggest reason Baxter's on the Texas roster. So my parting shot, don't have much, man. I'm just it was a busy weekend last weekend for me with Texas relays and just kids sports, which I think I mentioned it. I got like 3 weeks left of kids sports, and I love my kids sports. And catch, I think your daughter's playing softball, and where your boys play basketball. Man, it's fun, but I find myself, I'm at the point in my life, like I got so many kids doing so many damn things. I'm like, all right, if one of them backed down from a sport or two, it wouldn't break my heart. So we're almost to the end of my kids' sports cycles for the spring, and I'm looking for. What did I say? Last week, my daughters had practices literally every day. Thursday morning, my one daughter ran a track meet. That night, she played in a lacrosse game. Friday, she was down at Texas Relays. I was down there working and watching her run. Saturday, I was in San Antonio. It was like a 12-hour day in San Antonio for my other daughters at gymnastics meet. So I'm like, I am just ready for it's fun. I want to be the supportive dad, and I love it, and I love seeing them have fun and have some success from time to time. But damn it, man, they're coming at the end of the year. I'm like, let's just put a bow on this and be done with it. So, and then spring game next weekend, we'll have some. It's not going to be a loaded recruiting event, but we'll have recruiting coverage next weekend, and then tomorrow afternoon, guys, you guys know this, but most people don't. I'm off to Vegas, turning 50 this week. So yeah, with the jokes, but yeah, turning 50. So I'm going to Vegas. Just me and the wife going. Looking forward to just kind of getting away from reality for a couple of days. Go have my Vegas trips now are different than what they used to be. This will be about, hey, let's go have a nice meal or two, maybe go watch a magic show. Let's sleep in, but it won't be like staying up till 4 a.m. at the tables like it used to be. But yeah, so looking forward to a few days away from reality for a bit.
So you guys are going to the Spearmint Rhino is what you guys are saying?
Hey, I did throw that line in the water, and I was like, what do you want for your birthday? I go, I want this to be my Vegas trip, bro.
Spearmint Rhinos, what it sounds like to me. Don't ask how I know, but I know.
I'm not going to act like I didn't look up to see what the cover charge is. So.
Jason.
What? What? Hey, man. Just in case.
You got to ask yourself, Catch, which is worse? The fact that I knew it or the fact that Jason already looked it up?
Well, believe me, Jason, if you go and you want to have a good time, it's not going to be the cover charge at the door that gets you in or that breaks your bank account. That's like, I've already looked up the cover charges. Have you looked up how much private dances cost?
That made me push my luck a little bit, but yeah,
it's your 50th.
Yeah, you've known Chris a long time. He's pretty chill and pretty laid back. So
you should be able to do whatever you freaking want. So
and then he'll go back on his 51st when he's divorced. Come
with me. Come with me.
Let's go.
Exactly.
Baby.
Yeah. Suddenly, Joe Allison, one of Jason's friends that he and I both know really well, suddenly he's on the list of people making the trip. My parting shot is yesterday. Sunday was my wife's birthday, and yesterday was my mom's birthday. So of all of the things I would have been expecting for the last couple of days, me getting a gift wasn't on the radar. Yesterday, I'm watching a little TV, and my daughter comes home with my wife, and she comes into the bedroom and says, "Hey, Mom said to put some shoes on and come out and help with the groceries. So I'm like, okay, right? Nothing crazy about that. I go to open the door, and there is a 2-month-old Weimaraner in the back seat waiting for me. We lost our Weim Brady back last January, so it's been 14 months. And I got to say, it's always awesome to have a puppy in the house, but there's a part of me that was like, one, am I ready to have like Brady was my dog. So like replacing it with another dog like her, I wasn't really sure whether I was like, if you'd asked me yesterday, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not quite sure if I'm ready for that yet. And then having a puppy in the house is like having a new baby in the house. Like now you're back to piss and crap on the floor, and you've got to do the training and just all of the stuff that comes with it. But I am officially a Weimaraner puppy owner again. And it is a trip because it really does remind me of my old dog Brady when she was a puppy. So
Another
Jason's going to be, what's that?
Another female pup?
Yes. We
As
won't
a
have
former
dogs.
female Weimaraner owner, man. Those are the best dogs, dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. So Jason will be away in Vegas and won't be around as much. If over the next couple of days you feel like Orangebloods isn't being maintained normally, it may be that I'm on puppy duty and it's distracted me from a variety of things, as Anwar put in our Slack channel, that could pop up on the message boards. I've got to juggle puppy with sanity on Orangeblood. So just know my excuse is baked in now. Should the next couple of days be rocky for any reason at all, I'm blaming it on the 2-month-old puppy that we haven't officially named yet. But everybody in our house is calling the dog something different at this point. So I have to make a decision on the name of the dog soon. Otherwise, we're going to have the most confused dog in town because everybody's calling the dog something else. My son Hendrix is determined to have the dog named Chicken Nugget. And I'm like, we can't call the dog Chicken Nugget. And he's like, but it looks like a chicken nugget. And I'm just... Anyway.
The problem is when you guys have chicken nuggets, then it just throws everything out of whack.
And chicken nuggets, when you have 9-year-olds, as Anwar knows, and Jason too,
it's a staple.
the staple of the diet of the American 9-year-old child. And look, we made it through the entire Modcast without a single dog bark on my end today. I'm going to chalk that up as a victory. Guys, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends and family on social media. Do all of those things. We will see you in the coming days with more added content on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. But for now, for myself, Anwar, Jason, Blake producing behind the scenes, thanks for giving us some of your time today or tomorrow or whenever this video is watched. You guys have a great rest of the day.